What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today it's time to do something that we love to do here on What's On, Nintendo Direct speculation. That's right, it seems like we are due for a Nintendo Direct. I know I've said that sentence a lot this year and it hasn't often come true, but it seems like we are actually due for a Direct in the next few weeks. First, we had Switchforce, who's somehow been on a hot streak recently, telling us we're gonna have a Direct on September 12th. Then it was VGC who corroborated it, saying we'd have a Direct in mid-September. And then today, the great Nate the Hate said that yes, there will be a Nintendo Direct on or around September 12th, and I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but the wording to me sounded like it would be that full-fledged general Direct that Switchforce was pointing towards, weeks ago when this whole craziness started up with Switchforce somehow having a reliable source within Nintendo. All of that is to say that you might be watching this video and saying, Nick, you've done 2 videos in the past predicting Nintendo Directs that didn't actually happen. You did one in February and you did one in June, and guess what? Those months were absent in terms of Nintendo Direct presentations, and you'd be right, but to that I'd say, third time's the charm. It's gotta work out eventually that I make a Direct predictions video and a Direct follows suit a few weeks later. And I feel good about this being the one, and I feel good about this Direct potentially being a really exciting one for Nintendo. So how we like to do it here on the channel is that we're gonna go over all of the games that could potentially be revealed at a Nintendo Direct, and then I'll tell you my list of actual predictions of what I think will happen at the Direct, which of course is a much shorter list than the one we're going to talk about first. So let's not waste any time and let's just get into the list of games I think we could potentially see at a September Nintendo Direct. I first want to talk about, well, not really talk about, but bring up the Mario 40th anniversary, which has been a big source of discussion over the last month or two. A lot of people expect a Mario anniversary segment in the next Direct, or even a Mario anniversary Direct specifically. Now, I think that is a distinct possibility, so much so that I have already made a video predicting what we could see at Mario's 40th anniversary. So if you want to see that video, it's linked in the description, it's linked at the end. I'm not going to spend, 10 minutes or so going over what I think we could see in a potential Mario anniversary Direct, because I've already done that. So I'm not going to waste your time here with Mario stuff. So I'm not going to bring up anything Mario in this video, because I basically covered all of the Mario stuff we could get in that video. And you guys seem to like that video, did pretty well, so thanks for that. And if you haven't seen it, now's a perfect opportunity to check it out. I will just say, I think it's possible that we could get a Mario 40th anniversary segment in this general Direct. They did that for Zelda's 35th anniversary, so I don't think it's impossible that they do it for Mario, but I feel like they have a lot that they could talk about in terms of Mario's 40th, whether it be games or merchandise or the movie. So I think a separate Direct, maybe in the first week of September, makes more sense, but we'll find out in a bit. And again, if you want to hear what I think we could see at Mario's 40th, make sure to check out that video. I also have a really fun theory about a potential new reveal that Nintendo could make at a specific Mario 40th anniversary Direct that's going to blow your socks off. So make sure to check it out if you haven't. All right, now let's get into the September Direct possibilities. First, games that need dates. Very simple. Games that Nintendo has already announced that don't have specific dates attached to them. The obvious one, of course, is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, a game that, again, I just did a video about talking about where that game is, why so late in the year we still don't have a release date for it. I think this venue is going to be where we get the release date for it. It only makes sense. There's also been some discussion that perhaps we could get a Prime 4 Direct announced at this Nintendo Direct for maybe the 3rd week of September, and I think that could make a lot of sense. There's been discussion online about whether or not Nintendo's hiding something big about Metroid Prime 4. I don't know. I don't have a take either way. I think it's very possible that this game isn't super big and they're hiding a lot, but I think it's also possible that Prime 4 is going to be huge and we just don't know it yet. And if it is going to be huge, I think it would make sense to take 15 minutes the week after the Direct to discuss it in a game-specific presentation. I also think in that presentation, you could see a Prime 2 and 3 collection announced. You could see a special edition of the game announced, considering we got a special edition for Metroid Dread. If there's some sort of multiplayer mode, which people have brought up, maybe there's a battle royale of some sort in Metroid Prime 4, I don't know, could happen. That would make sense to have at a Prime 4 Direct, and then maybe even a demo announcement, though Nintendo doesn't often do that. Regardless, I think that's a lock for this Direct. Another game that I think is pretty close to a lock is Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which right now just has a winter date on it, meaning it could drop to 2026, but regardless, we're probably going to see it here, even if it is a 2026 title. We got that weird trailer in the partner showcase that didn't really show much of anything until that tease at the end, so it's been a very weird hype cycle for Hyrule Warriors. I don't know if it's going to come out this year. For my prediction, wait till the end of the video. I'll tell you when I think it is coming out in specific, but I think it is also a lock to be at this presentation with a release date. We then got the two games that Nintendo announced in the March Direct, Rhythm Heaven Groove and Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. I'm of the belief that Rhythm Heaven is going to come out first. It's a smaller game. We saw more of it. We saw actual gameplay of it. And I think it makes a lot of sense as a January or February game, considering that Rhythm Heaven has never been a very popular series for Nintendo, so they don't really need to position it in a prime month, quote unquote, for video game releases. January is sort of seen as a dead month for video game spending. I don't think they'd want to put Tomodachi Life there. I think that makes a lot of sense as a summer game, but Rhythm Heaven, I think, makes sense to happen in the first few months of the year. So I think there's a chance that we don't see Tomodachi Life here at all, I think, and you'll see in my predictions, I think that's what's going to happen, because I think that is a latter half of 2026 game, but I think Rhythm Heaven is close to a lock here. It could skip the presentation if it's not ready, but in my eyes, this is going to be a January or February of 2026 game, and if that's the case, we need to see it here. We then have the other two Switch 2 exclusives that Nintendo has announced. The Duskbloods, of course, coming in 2026. Yeah, I think it's a coin flip chance if we see this in the Direct. I'm not sure this is an early 2026 game. It certainly could be, and FromSoft usually likes to release their games in the first half of the year, if I recall correctly. Night Rain was in May, Elden Ring was in March, so perhaps it will be a first half of 2026 game like those two. I'm not sure if we're going to see it here. If it's a May game like Night Rain, we could see it in a February Direct next year, so I don't think it's a lock by any means, but it's certainly possible to show up. And then Splatoon Raiders, which had a very interesting reveal in June when they showed us a teaser of it alongside a Splatoon 3 Switch 2 update. This, of course, has no window accompanying it at all. I don't think it's a impossibility that this could be a 2025 game. I think there's a chance that maybe it is going to come out this year, but I think it's a lot more likely it's going to come out next year. I would suspect this is a first half of 2026 game, and I think we will see it here because there's just a lot, I think, that they need to show us of this game. We don't really know what the game is whatsoever. There's been debates. Is it a survival game? Is it a RPG type of game? Is it just Splatoon but in single-player form? We don't know. We've got to find out. I think it will be at this presentation. Sorry, I had to turn on a light. It's like so dark in this room. I'm straining my eyes trying to record this. All right, Splatoon Raiders, yeah. I already talked about Splatoon Raiders. Nice. So those are the Nintendo games without a specific date, but there are some third-party games as well that we need updates on. Elden Ring Tarnished Edition is coming out in 2025. We don't know when. Similar thing with Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, which has a winter 2025 window attached to it. Hades 2, I don't believe has a specific window, but we know it's launching as a Switch 2 exclusive, and the insinuation was that it would come out this year, so I think that's honestly a lock to show up here in addition to Elden Ring and Final Fantasy. And then I wrote Monster Hunter Stories 3, which I'm not sure is even a Switch 2 exclusive, but is one that feels like it might be a first half of 2026 game. Capcom is so darn busy in 2026, it feels like they're dropping like 5 different games in that year, so who knows where Stories slots in, but I think we could see another look at it at this Direct, though perhaps it's a game that makes more sense in a February Direct next year. Also, I just want to shout out some smaller third-party games that need dates and are set to come this year. Opus Prism Peak we saw in the indie world. Sidebar here, I recently bought all of the Opus games physically on the Switch. More expensive than you'd expect, because I wanted to get into the series before Prism Peak. Do I regret the purchase? I don't know, but it is something I did, and I haven't started them yet. I feel like they're going to be good September games. Regardless, none of this matters. You don't care about my spending habits. Opus Prism Peak, we saw at that Indie World, I think, we could see a release date at this presentation. Professor Layton and the New World of Steam is still set for release in 2025. I've been saying forever now, I think that's going to get delayed. Level 5, even though they got Fantasy Life out the door this year, I still think they're kind of dysfunctional. I don't think it's going to come out this year. But if it does, we are almost certainly going to see it at this presentation, so it's worth a shout out. Witchbrook is a game we saw at both the March and April Directs this year. I'd be pretty shocked if it's not in this Direct with a release date, because it seems like they are pushing the Switch and Switch 2 versions, so that'll be exciting. And then Mouse PI for Hire is a game that's also coming to Switch and Switch 2. I don't think it's ever shown up in a Nintendo presentation to this point. Would make a lot of sense to have a release date trailer in this September Direct. All right, so those are all the games we know about. Games that have a 2025 or 2026 window, with the exception of Splatoon, and that make sense to show up at this Direct. Now let's get into some more fun stuff. First, some Switch 2 Edition and Switch 2 Update talk, because I think that is another lock for this Direct. We are going to see some Switch 2 Editions and upgrades. Again, if you want to hear my thoughts on potential Mario Switch 2 Editions, check out my 40th anniversary video. But besides some of the Mario games that make a lot of sense for updates, I think Pikmin 4 is the obvious one for a Switch 2 edition. A lot of people have brought this one up. I'm no, soothsayer for predicting this one if it does come true, but it makes a lot of sense. Pikmin 3 got DLC, Pikmin 4 suspiciously didn't, and that's a game that would look so beautiful in 4K 60. Even mouse controls could make sense for Pikmin 4. I don't know if it would work as well with a game like Pikmin 3, for example, with the new camera angle and the new controls that Pikmin 4 implements, but I still think it would be worth a shot, and I would love to dive back into Pikmin 4. So I think that makes a lot of sense for a Switch 2 edition. I also think there's some series that make a lot of sense for free updates. Nintendo pretty heavily insinuated on their website that there's going to be more waves of updates. We got the first wave of updates on June 5th with the launch of the Switch 2. I think there's going to be a lot more games that get free updates to make them look better, run nicer, etc. The entire Xenoblade series, I think, makes a lot of sense for that. Same thing with Metroid Prime and Metroid Dread. Dread, I think, drops frames in some places, so it would make sense to just get that up to a consistent 60, maybe even 120. Same thing with Prime Remastered. Would be a great game to bump up to 120 perhaps, or just make look beautiful, right? 4K 60 for that game, perfect. And mouse controls could make a lot of sense for Prime Remastered. So I think those are two games that also make a lot of sense for updates, and those are two games we could see talked about in a Prime 4 Direct, like I was talking about earlier. I also think the 2D DKs could make sense for free updates now that Bonanza's out. That would be something that perhaps gets addressed at a Mario presentation though, so who knows? And then Bayonetta and Astral Chain, the Platinum Games developed Switch exclusives that are good games in their own right, but certainly need some boosts on the Switch 2. Could certainly use some upgrades. Obviously, you could spend like 15 minutes listing Switch 2 editions and Switch 2 upgrades and all that stuff. Those are just my quick thoughts on some games that I think make sense for Switch 2 editions or Switch 2 updates, and I think it's a lock we're going to see at least one free Switch 2 update or paid Switch 2 edition in this Direct. All right, I have a list of first-party Nintendo teams that I think are due for new games. But first, let's talk about some Nintendo games that have been rumored for just about forever, since like 2019. And I wrote on my doc, if these games do not get announced at this Direct, I will never talk about them again. This is the last time I'm going to bring them up, because I think this is the last time where it really makes sense to announce them in any way. So let's get into it. First one, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD Collection. This has been a rumor since literally the Switch 1 came out. With the addition of GameCube on NSO, I think this is pretty much dead. We saw Wind Waker on NSO. I think we'll see Twilight Princess on NSO as well. It's a darn shame because I think those Wii U remasters of those games are actually really good and have some really great quality of life upgrades, so those are lost to time, I suppose, but what are you going to do? The next one I have here is the Fire Emblem 4 remake. This is another game I just don't think is happening anymore. It's weird because I think this was the last Emily Rogers leak that had yet to be proven true. Emily leaked a bunch of stuff. Basically everything she leaked came true besides this one. There's a chance it was scrapped. There's a chance it was moved to a Switch 2 only game, and that's why we haven't seen it. But it's just weird that she got everything else right except that, and also Nate has been talking about Fire Emblem 4 Remake for a while as well. I think this game did exist at some point. Someone in my comment section during I think it was my February Direct predictions said that they think whoever saw this and leaked it to Nate and Emily just saw Fire Emblem Engage and thought it was a Fire Emblem 4 remake, which is a theory that makes sense to me, even if it is a little odd, I guess, because, again, this was a heavily reported rumor. So I kind of think this is the last chance for Fire Emblem 4 remake because, as we're going to talk about in a second, I think a new Fire Emblem game is due anytime soon now. So if we don't see the Fire Emblem 4 remake here, I just don't think it exists. The final one is Kirby Planet Robobot, which was another game that was leaked, quote-unquote, by Nate the Hate early in 2025. I think of these 3 games I have listed here, Planet Robobot is the most likely one to get revealed at some point, even if it's not in this direct. Would be a lot of Kirby, right? We just had the terrific Kirby and the Forgotten Land DLC that came out last week. We're getting Kirby Air Riders in November. Are we really also going to get Planet Robobot this year? I'm not sure. The only thing I would say in support of a potential Planet Robobot port is that the Switch 1 doesn't have anything Kirby this year. People are talking about how it would be too much Kirby to have 3 Kirby games in 1 year, and I suppose that is true, but it's only a lot of Kirby for Switch 2 users. And if you're Nintendo and you release the Kirby and the Forgotten Land upgrade, Kirby Air Riders, and Planet Robobot in the span of 5 months, you want people to buy the upgrade and Kirby Air Riders, right? You want people to buy the Switch 2 software. So if those people who are kind of burnt out on Kirby don't buy Planet Robobot, that doesn't really matter to you. It's a low-stakes remaster that you're just throwing out there to support the Switch 1 in its twilight years. So that is to say that I don't think the release of Planet Robobot on Switch 1 is impacted at all by what Kirby's doing on Switch 2. I think they're separate issues. I think if it doesn't come out this year, Nintendo just wanted to hold on to it for whatever reason. I very well think it could show up at this Direct for a, October or November release date. Maybe not October. That seems like it's going to be a busy Switch 1 month. And also, Nate was just so confident in that being real, and I've said before, Nate does not take a shot he thinks he might miss, so I'd be very shocked if this was just wrong straight up. I think we'll see it at the very least in 2026, but I don't think it's impossible that it would show up this year. All right, now let's get into the fun stuff. I have 5 Nintendo teams listed who I think are due for a new game and who I think we could see a reveal from at this Direct. The first one is Intelligent Systems, and specifically their Fire Emblem team. The last Fire Emblem game we got was in early 2023 with Fire Emblem Engage, so it'll have been 3 years this January in between Fire Emblem games. That isn't necessarily abnormal, but Intelligent Systems has been really quiet, and I think we all expected a Fire Emblem 4 remake by now. The fact that we haven't seen it either means that that is a Switch 2 game and they're putting more effort into it, or that the next Fire Emblem is not going to be for a remake, but rather a new game entirely. Not to spoil my actual predictions, but to be quite honest, I think this is the most likely new announcement for a Nintendo Direct. I think the timing is right. There was also a leak recently that some guy who I think worked on Fire Emblem in the past talked about working on a new Nintendo strategy RPG game. I don't know, that rumor was kind of weird to me, but that theoretically would suggest that the next Fire Emblem is close to completion, if not just done. I think Fire Emblem would make a lot of sense as an opener or closer to this Direct. The next team on my list is Camelot, who hasn't released a game since June of 2021. So we've gone over 4 years without a Camelot game, which is abnormal for them. They usually don't take that long, usually 3 years in between releases. Mario Sports is the obvious assumption, and I talked about that in the 40th anniversary video I made, but I also think Golden Sun is a distinct possibility. There were some reports, I think maybe by Kit and Krista, about how Nintendo does value the Golden Sun franchise and would like to revisit it, but they know that Mario Sports makes them a lot of money, and so that series gets prioritized. Remember also that Camelot is not owned by Nintendo, so perhaps they can't afford a quote-unquote dud in Golden Sun, which isn't going to sell 3+ million units like the Mario Sports games do without even trying. All that is to say that I think it's very possible that we will see a new Camelot game soon. It could be at that 40th anniversary Direct for Mario if it's a Mario Sports game. It could be at this Direct if it's Golden Sun, but I think at the latest by February of next year in the Winter Direct, we'll see the new game from Camelot. The next team on my list is, of course, the great Monolith Soft, a team that released Xenoblade 3 in mid-2022, although that game reportedly was ready and finished in 2021, so make of that what you will. They, of course, also released the Future Redeemed DLC in early 2023, but none of the main producers of Xenoblade were on that title. It was more of some auxiliary members of the team that worked on that DLC. which would suggest that senior Monolith Soft producers like Takahashi or Kojima are ready to reveal a new game because they've theoretically been working on it for 3+ years now. There's been some whispers that Monolith is not only working on a new Xenoblade game, but also a new IP entirely, perhaps a medieval RPG. I'm not really sure where that rumor started. People are convinced we're getting a Monolith Soft medieval action RPG next year. I'm not sure I quite believe that, but I do believe they probably have 2 games in production at once. I suppose there's a chance that the team that made Future Redeemed is working on the side on a smaller medieval RPG while Takahashi works on the next Xenoblade. I'm not really sure. Point is, anything Monolith is exciting, so would love to see it. I think it makes sense, and that's another company that I think we will see a game reveal from at the latest by that Winter Direct next year. The next team is one that everyone has brought up in the past year or so, Next Level Games, who hasn't released a game since 2022 with the very underbaked Mario Strikers Battle League. And before that, it was Luigi's Mansion 3 in 2019. A lot of people were convinced Luigi's Mansion 3 was coming out this holiday. Obviously, that's not going to be the case anymore. I definitely could see Luigi's Mansion 3 releasing in 2026 at some point. Perhaps it makes more sense as a early 2026 announcement, though remember, Luigi's Mansion 3 was revealed in the September 2018 Direct. I also think there's a chance Next Level is just working on something else entirely. I think they would be a great fit for maybe a new Star Fox game. Obviously, they could be working on another new Punch-Out game, considering that IP hasn't done anything in the past few decades. I also think it's a possibility that Next Level has been working on Luigi's Mansion 4 and another game, and that those are both going to come out in the next few years. Because again, Mario Strikers Battle League was about as content dry as you can get with a Nintendo game, so I don't believe that really took that much time. Maybe that's sort of naive by me, but that didn't seem like a really high effort release compared to something like Luigi's Mansion 3. There is also a chance that Luigi's Mansion 4 is just so much bigger than 3, and that's why it's taking them longer. Regardless, I think we are due for a new Next Level Games release, and I think we'll see it at some point in the next few months. The final Nintendo team that I think is due is EPD4. I think it was a shock to a lot of people when we saw that neither Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour or Dragon Drive were made by EPD4. I think Dragon Drive had some involvement from some people from EPD4, but it wasn't a game made by EPD4 specifically. And of course, for the uninitiated, EPD4 is the team that makes games like Nintendo Switch Sports and Ring Fit Trainer and all these weird experimental games from Nintendo. And they always have a game ready close to launch for a Nintendo console. And yet they have been mysteriously absent from the start of the generation for the Switch 2, which makes me think they are working on something that is going to come out pretty soon. Whatever the case, I think EPD4 is the most likely team to show off a new game from Nintendo, whether it's at this Direct or at a Winter Direct. Now let's go over some potential third-party announcements that we could see at a September Nintendo Direct. Now, obviously, you could go any number of directions with something like this. Literally any game could be possible for a port to the Switch 2, so it's hard to predict this stuff, but I just have a few games or companies that I think could make a lot of sense to show up at this September Direct. The first one I have here is Danganronpa, because it is the 15th anniversary of Danganronpa this year, and the voice actor for, I believe, Monokuma in English was teasing something Danganronpa happening this year. It could just be merchandise, it could just be another anime or something stupid, but I think there could also be some sort of video game celebration for Danganronpa. We already had Danganronpa Decadence, which was a collection, come out in 2021. I think a game like Ultra Despair Girls getting a Switch 2 port could make a lot of sense. That's a game that would work well with mouse controls. Or maybe there would be some smaller new release for the franchise. Regardless, we saw Danganronpa Decadence show up at a Nintendo Direct in 2021, and every time Kaz has some sort of game, even if it's not something he's making and just some sort of re-release, it tends to show up at a Nintendo Direct. So if there's something Danganronpa happening this year for the anniversary, I think there's a good chance we'd see it at this Direct. There's been a lot of rumors of Red Dead Redemption 2 getting a next-gen patch, including a Switch 2 edition this year. It would be a big announcement for Nintendo to have a game like Red Dead 2 show up at a Direct. Obviously, Rockstar likes to toot their own horn and make announcements whenever they see fit. But remember, GTA 5's HD Next Gen Edition was shown off at that one Sony event in 2020. So perhaps Nintendo made a similar deal with Rockstar to have this Red Dead patch shown off first at a Nintendo Direct, because it would be a big reveal for Nintendo. It would be a big moment for the Switch 2 to have one of the best-selling games of all time show up at a Nintendo Direct. I think it makes a lot of sense to see Red Dead 2 here. I think anything from Capcom is a distinct possibility, but I think especially any of the modern Resident Evil games getting ported over would make a lot of sense, whether it's 7, 8, or the 2, 3, and 4 remakes. I don't think Requiem is going to come anywhere close to day and date with the Switch 2. I think it will come eventually. People have insinuated as much, but I don't think it's going to come day and date. I don't think we'll see it here, but I think maybe a 2, 3, and 4 remake collection could make a lot of sense for the Switch 2, and I think it could be announced here. I have Project Watari from Arc System Works listed here. There was a leak a few months ago from Arc System Works where 2 games for Nintendo consoles were leaked, Project Life and Project Watari. And the leak for Project Life even had screenshots attached to it, screenshots that were taken directly from the game Dear Me, I Was, which we saw at the Arc System Works presentation in June. So if that game is real, I'm pretty sure Project Watari is real as well. Apparently, it was supposed to be a Switch and Switch 2 game coming out in November. A lot of people thought at the time it might be a Xenoblade fighting game or a Fire Emblem fighting game or something like that. But since ArcSys is working on Marvel Tokon, I don't think they're going to be doing another 2D fighter for a different company, though I don't think it's impossible. Maybe down the road we'll get a 2D fighter from ArcSys on a Nintendo console. Regardless, I do think Watari is something. I'm not sure what it would be, but again, the rumor said it was coming out this November, and I'm inclined to believe that is still happening. So unless it got delayed, which is possible, I think it is a distinct possibility. I've said that a lot today, distinct possibility, but this really is a distinct possibility to show up at this September Direct. The next thing I have written down here is a Xenosaga collection. I say this because it seems like Takahashi wants to write the Xenosaga stories back into the general canon of the Xenoblade games, and it seems like Xenoblade 4 might have more connection to the Xenosaga games than the first 3 did. I'm not really going to explain why. You'd have to really get in the weeds of the Xeno series to explain why. Just trust me on that one. The point is, if that is Takahashi's goal, I feel like you kind of need to re-release Xenosaga. It was a trilogy on the PlayStation 2 that has kind of been lost to time, and whenever you talk about a potential Xenosaga remaster, people always say, there's no way that's happening. No way. And I always think, like, why do we think there's no way that's happening? I don't know. I hear arguments from people. They don't really make sense. I think it could definitely happen, especially if the Xenosaga storyline is going to become more relevant for the Xenoblade series moving forward. Not to mention that Nintendo and Bandai Namco, who published Xenosaga, have a terrific relationship. So if Takahashi really wanted the Xenosaga games re-released so the story could be experienced by more people, I think Nintendo could push for that and work out a deal with Bandai Namco, who seems pretty flexible with stuff like this. Now, Xenogears, that's a whole different story. I don't think that's ever coming out of the vault. But Xenosaga, I think we could definitely see a collection of coming next year at some point. The next one I have here is Project M, not the Melee mod, but a game from Bloober Team. Apparently they are working on a Switch 2 game that they are self-publishing. I think they revealed this in some sort of investor meeting, and I think it's relevant because I think their CEO recently came out and said how he wants to see Nintendo dabble more into horror and how he'd like to bring some of Bloober's horror experiences to the Switch 2, which makes me feel like this fabled Project M that has been kind of floating around in Nintendo circles for the past year or so might be closer than we might have thought initially, and I could definitely see it shown off here, though Bloober has been doing a lot recently, right? They did the Silent Hill remake last year, Chronos is coming out on the 5th this year, so maybe they'll wait a little to show off Project M, but I think within the next year we'll see that announced, and it's certainly a possibility to be shown off here. I've got PlayStation written down here. We saw recently that PlayStation was hiring an employee that essentially was responsible for making ports to other systems, including the Nintendo Switch 2, work. So I don't know what that entails, but it suggests to me that games like Everybody's Golf Hot Shots and Patapon 1+2 collection are going to be more common for Sony. Even if they don't dip their toes in releasing games like God of War and Horizon and Spider-Man on the Switch 2, I think a game like Gravity Rush could make a lot of sense for the Switch and Switch 2, or maybe just Switch 2, especially considering there's supposed to be a Gravity Rush movie soon. I don't really know why that's happening. Sony loves their movie tie-ins, so apparently Gravity Rush is getting a film soon. Would only make sense to have a collection to come out alongside that. There was also a rumor that Gravity Rush 2 Remastered or something popped up on some sort of PlayStation Store page. This was a while back, so we haven't seen anything from that yet. Perhaps that is a state of play announcement because Sony seems to value Gravity Rush more than some other Japan studio IPs. But I also think a collection could definitely be revealed in a Nintendo Direct, so watch out for that. A port that I'm surprised we haven't seen yet is Baldur's Gate 3. Makes a lot of sense for the Switch 2. It is a very CPU-heavy game. Who knows how well it would run on the Switch 2. But this is a game that Nate said would come out in the launch window of the Switch 2. It's a game that just makes a lot of freaking sense for the Switch 2. And I could see it having a very short reveal to release window. Maybe it even comes out this month or next month after getting announced in a September Direct. The final third-party game I have listed here is one that's sort of a pipe dream for me, Nintendo versus Capcom. We know ArcSys is working on Marvel Tokon. There's been suggestions that perhaps there will still be another MVC in the future, but for now, the versus Capcom series doesn't seem to have a partner, and I think Nintendo versus Capcom would be a perfect fit, especially because Nintendo probably isn't going to have a fighter for a while. I think Smash Bros. Is going to be a later in the generation game, so why not work with Capcom and make Nintendo versus Capcom? Could you imagine how cool that would be if that happened? Oh my gosh. So I don't think that's actually going to happen, but it's something I've been trying to wish cast in my last few prediction videos. Gonna bring it up again. Let's do that, Capcom. Nintendo versus Capcom. Be sick. Come on. All right, those are all the games I think we could see at this September Direct, but now let's go through my actual predictions for the event. I think the September Direct is going to open on a new Fire Emblem game. Let's call it Fire Emblem Shadows, and it's going to have a spring 2026 window. In terms of first-party headlines, I think Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is going to get a date for February 5th, 2026. Yes, I do think it's going to slip out of 2025, which will be disappointing, but what are you going to do? I think Rhythm of Heaven Groove is going to come out January 22nd. I think Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to be out October 30th. And no, I do not think we will see Tomodachi Life. I do not think we will see the Duskbloods. I do think we'll see Splatoon Raiders. Wait a second for my prediction on that. I think we'll get a Switch 2 edition / upgrade segment. I think Pikmin 4 is going to get that Switch 2 edition. It's going to come out in November. And then I think Astral Chain, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, and Engage. And then Xenoblade 1, 3, and X will get free upgrades. Not Xenoblade 2, because I do think they're going to do the definitive edition treatment for Xenoblade 2. I then think we'll get a middle segment. Please take a look at this. It is Splatoon Raiders. We'll actually see what the heck the game is. It'll look even better than last time, and it will also get a spring 2026 window. For some third-party headlines, I think Red Dead Redemption 2 will get that fabled third-party port coming out in October. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is going to take the December 5th slot at the beginning of the final month of the year. I think Elden Ring Tarnished Edition will come out November 13th. I think Gravity Rush is going to get a collection announced for winter 2026. And I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be announced for release later this month. I think September, late September sometime, makes a lot of sense for Baldur's Gate. And then I think they will close the Direct out on Monolith Soft's next game. And I do think it will be that new IP that we have been talking about. I don't know if it's going to be a medieval action RPG like people have suggested, but I do think we're going to get some sort of new game from Monolith Soft. It could just be Xenoblade 4, but I think that's going to take a little more time, and I do think it's going to be a side project. I don't know if this actually makes sense, but I don't think it's going to have direct involvement from Takahashi and Kojima. That being Tetsuya Takahashi and Kojima, by the way, not Shinya Takahashi and Hideo Kojima. Some of you probably thought that's what I meant. Not what I mean. Those are the two senior producers at Monolith Soft. Anyway, I think there's a chance that that team that made the Xenoblade 3 DLC, maybe some other members as well, and maybe Takahashi and Kojima are producing in some way. I think there's a chance that Monolith Soft is kind of breaking off and making 2 games at once, and I think this new IP is probably a smaller game, maybe a little bit more contained than a Xenoblade game would be. Those are, 100-hour epics. I don't know if this new IP would be, but I think it makes sense that a smaller break-off team would make this sort of similar to Donkey Kong Bonanza in a way, but not entirely. I think we will see a Monolith Soft announcement at this Direct, even if it is just Xenoblade 4. I'll stake my claim, though, and say yes, it's going to be that long-rumored new IP from the company. So those are my thoughts and predictions on the potential of a September 2025 Nintendo Direct. If you thought my predictions were a little light, that's because I think we're going to get some Mario stuff, whether it be Mario Kart World DLC or a Galaxy 2 HD port for the Switch and Switch 2 in September. And if you want to hear me talk more about that, be sure to check out that 40th anniversary Mario video that I did a few weeks ago. Again, I'll link it right here at the end of the video and down below. But that's all I've got for this video. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think we're going to see at this potential September General Nintendo Direct? Do you think they're going to have some big first-party announcements? Or do you think it's just going to be going over stuff we already know about? Let me know in the comments below, and also tell me, what is your biggest hope for a announcement at a September Direct? Mine would be that new Monolith Soft game I talked about, whether it's Xenoblade 4 or a new IP entirely. I really want to see what they've been cooking for the Switch 2. But again, anything you want to say, drop it down below. It's a freaking party down there. Try to respond to as many comments as I can, so be sure to let your thoughts be known down below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, hit that big, fat button. I've got some other videos in the works that are set to come out this month. You're not going to want to miss it. And of course, when the Direct does happen, whether it be a Mario Direct or a General Direct or a Prime 4 Direct or whatever, we will be here to discuss it and react to it when the time comes. So make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any of the stuff coming to this channel or any of the reactions and discussions that should be prevalent in this very busy month of September. It seems like there might be a Sony thing as well. We'll wait and see on that. Make sure to share the video with a friend who is hyped about a potential September Nintendo Direct. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.